All right, I got to figure out how to turn off that notification. That's definitely new to me. Okay, so today is Wednesday, May 26th. We'll be going over some Python basics. So some of you guys may have never seen Python before. That's totally okay. I always say if you know one programming language, it's pretty easy to pick up another one. So if you guys are getting comfortable with JavaScript, Python shouldn't be too much of a challenge to adapt to. But that'll be the material we're going over today. But let's back up a day, actually. So I'm going to go to week 1. May 25th. So this was yesterday's material. We went over Git, GitHub, JavaScript fundamentals. So just went over some more basics there. So I'm going to scroll down to the bottom of that page. So you guys had a few challenges. I guess 3 or 4 4 or 5 listed here. So hopefully you guys had fun with them. Again, don't feel bad if you were unable to complete all of them last night. Definitely, again, just because the day's over doesn't mean you guys can kind of forget about these challenges. Like if you guys have extra time today or whenever it might be, definitely go back to these if you didn't complete them the night before. So the one I'm going to be going over today is Roman numerals. So let's click on that and let's go through the process of getting it to my machine so we could start coding with it. So I'm actually going to poll the audience just to see if we get some assistance here. Stefan Sun, you're actually first on my screen. What's the first thing I should do that I'm on the Platoon challenge page? What's the first thing that we recommend?
If you haven't, fork the repository.
Absolutely. Yep. So always remember to fork. So again, some students will make this mistake, not a big deal. If you clone down from this URL, you will be able to get the code and add your solution locally. But when you get to pushing it back to GitHub, you'll actually get some error saying you don't have write access to this repository because we've blocked write access for students to Platoon. So that's why you want to fork it over to your personal repository. So I'm going to do that right now. That's my personal repository. It'll do its thing. All right, great. So it took a few seconds, but it looks like it's forked. So I'm just looking at the header here. It is in my personal repository. So that's great to see. Stop now. Okay, Alex Saunders, you're second on my screen. Could I ask you what the next step here would be to get this to my local machine? You might be muted.
You would copy it from the code or the green code button.
Yep. So there's a URL here. I'm going to copy that. Yep, absolutely. And so I'm going to go over to my terminal that I had open. Again, I have my challenges all nested in the code Oscar challenges folder. You guys might have it in a different location. So to clone it down, Sarah Delheim, you're on my screen. Do you remember the command to clone it down to your local machine from GitHub?
I don't remember the exact command. It was git something and then the URL.
Yep. Yeah, that's right. Again, you guys are going to be doing this much more, and it'll become second nature. But yeah, you had the gist of it. So it's going to be git, and then the git command of clone, and then the URL. So looks like I copied that incorrectly. Let me do that again. Not sure how that happened. So yep, git clone and the URL from GitHub. So this is the URL that I copied down. So optionally, I could add a folder name here, like new folder if I want to, and it'll clone it into that folder. Otherwise, it's just going to create a default folder based on the source that I'm cloning down from. So I'm just going to use that. Just going to hit enter. All right, so that cloned it down. So if I do an ls, again, ls will list the directory contents here. Notice I have 99 bottles, which I cloned down a couple days ago. And then I have Roman numerals, which I just cloned down. So I'm going to go into that folder. And then I'm going to type code and then period. So this is going to open a new VS Code in this with this current directory as the workspace. So let me hit enter. And there pops up VS Code. I'm going to enlarge this and actually move this elsewhere. All right, so
branch first.
Oh, what was that? Oh, I think creating a branch. Yeah, so branching, definitely something we want to get familiar with. I often don't branch, so maybe I'm a bad example there. But since this is my my personal repository, I'm just going to work off the master branch. But definitely a good point. Like I want to get familiar with branching, especially when you get into group projects. Branching is going to be basically a requirement because you guys don't want to be messing with the master branch when you guys are adding features. But for now, I'm just going to go with master branch if that's all right with everyone.
I've got a question.
Yep, absolutely.
So Tom's approach to like Git cloning, he does it all within VS Code. Is there a particular reason that you use the terminal versus like VS Code? Is that just like a workflow preference? Is there a best practice thing, or yeah, what any insight there?
Great question. I think it's just personal preference as far as I would say. The reason I always just have an external window here is because this defaults to code, Oscar, and challenges. So I don't know how to really navigate to that. That's my default path. And yeah, I usually just use this externally. I don't have a good reason other than I'm just used to it. So yeah, it's just personal preference. There's nothing wrong with the integrated VS Code terminal. I guess the only thing there is like I don't always have a VS Code open, so I usually have my terminal window open. So that's usually why I go through that process. But yeah, again, you guys might have your own processes. It's totally fine. All right. So I cloned down Roman numerals, opened that workspace. So notice that there's a JS folder and a Python folder. So for early on, a lot of our challenges, we are going to ask you to do it in JavaScript and then eventually Python, just to get that repetition and familiarity with both languages. Okay, but we're going to be coding this in JavaScript. So I'm going to go to the JavaScript folder and then open up the spec file. So as we talked about, the spec file is our testing suite. Right now, we're just kind of printing some stuff up to the console, like checking expected values versus what we get from our algorithm. As we progress, we're going to be actually creating real test suites that will run using Jest for JavaScript, and then Python has a built-in unit test framework that we can use. But for now, we're just going to do some console logs. That's good enough for our needs right now. All right, so we have some base test cases here. For a lot of the early challenges, we might give you some test cases. I would highly recommend don't just settle for those test cases. Add your own. Make it more robust. Like again, having these three, I can tell you this is not testing everything that I'd want to test. Like I only see the I and the V being tested here. So there, if you know Roman numerals, there's X, there's C. Definitely want to have some higher numbers here. So again, just because we give you a file with something in it shouldn't necessarily mean, hey, all right, that's all I need to test with. All right, so this is our spec file. We're actually going to be adding our solution to the Roman numerals.js. So here we have a stubbed out function. So that's just some terminology to get familiar with. When you hear stubbed out function, that just means you have the function definition, but you have nothing inside actual body of the function. There's no logic here. We just have the structure that we're looking for. So I know there was a question yesterday about exports. Just to kind of go over that one more time. So exports is the mechanism where we can create items in this file and any other file that includes it. So in this case, if I go back to my spec file, we're including the Roman numerals file or module here. So anything that the Roman numerals file exports is something that can be imported in this file. So hypothetically, if we didn't do this, we'd get an error with 2 Roman because it wouldn't be available. Let's actually see this in action rather than me just talking about it. So exports. Let's run our spec file. So this is we're going to cover this a little more in detail tomorrow in terms of test-driven development. But generally, you want to write your test cases first, and then give them a run, and then work on them one by one, depending on the solution or the task you're trying to solve. So I'm actually going to run my spec file and see what I get out of it. So Roman numerals, I need to go into my JS folder. And then let me give a run for my spec file. So Roman numerals spec.js. Before I progress here, is my font size, everything good? Is everything easy to see? Do I need to enlarge anything? Just let me know.
Yeah, it works for me.
It works for me.
Gotcha. All right, thanks guys. All right, so I'm gonna do node Roman numerals.spec. All right, cool. So notice I got 3 falses outputted to the console. So eventually I want all these to be true. All right, so these 3 lines ran. Obviously my function right now is not outputting anything, so that's why these test cases are failing. let's actually do what I was suggesting earlier. I'm just going to get rid of this exports, and let's see what actually happens. So if I save this and try to run my spec file again, notice I get an error. So this is saying, hey, toRoman is not a function. Now, I might say to myself, well, that's not true. I created this function. It totally exists. The reason you will see this error is because this file, my Roman numerals spec file, doesn't have access to this function because we never export it. So this is a function that's only available in this specific file. But if you add the exports object here, now we're basically creating a toRoman property on this exports object so that it will be available in this file. Again, I know it's a little confusing to kind of grasp that on a deeper level, but on a high level, just kind of understand this file will say, hey, here's all the stuff I'm allowing you to access, and then this file can access whatever's being allowed. So sometimes you might want to keep things private to this file, and that in that case, you wouldn't export it via this method.
I've got a quick question, Ankur. So is that export only accessible in the JS file, or can you go back and also access it through the challenges file?
Through the challenges file. Could you?
Oh, I'm sorry, the folder, not the file.
The folder. So are you saying if I were not in this folder, but I had like a file external here?
Yeah, so like so this Roman function, would you be able to access it through, let's say, like the challenges directory, or is it only local in the JS folder?
Gotcha. No, yeah, no, absolutely. You can get to these files in any manner you want. So if I go back to my list here, so I believe you're saying if I were in this challenges folder and had, let's say I had another file here. Let's actually try this out quickly if you guys don't mind. So if I touch and create a new file, let's call it hello.js. And then I want to open one file here. All right, so I opened my challenges folder. Again, correct me if I'm kind of going off track here, but I have this hello file. I can totally go into Roman numerals JS and include this file if I want to. So if I actually want to give that a go, I could go, let's see. Let Roman equal requires. All right, so I just, the only challenge is I got to make sure I navigate correctly. So I need to go into Roman numerals and then JS to get to Roman numerals here. So let me go Roman numerals. Hopefully I don't make typos, but I tend to make typos. All right, so VS Code, again, another rep for VS Code. It makes it kind of handy. As I was typing, notice when I open this folder with a slash, and just in the string, it actually shows me the contents of that folder. So that's kind of just nice. So I could select which one I want to import. So in this case, Roman numerals. And now, yeah, I should have access to that Roman function here. So if I did Roman, forget the name of the function.
Okay, so it's all about how you route it with the requires function.
Yep. Yeah. So yeah, you should be able to get to any module that you want, regardless of where it's located. So yeah, since this exports something, anyone that includes this file will be able to access it, regardless of where it is or where it's being imported from. But good question there. All right, so I'm actually going to kill this window because I had my other one open. All right, so we're in our Roman numerals folder. Let's actually try to think about this process. So I think I want to go to this page. So for Roman numerals, we have like a pseudocode kind of created for you guys. This is just an example. We're not going to do this for every challenge, but this is something that we highly, highly encourage you guys to do before solving any problem, especially when the problems get a little more in-depth. It's good to kind of have a game plan set up ahead of time rather than just jumping into coding and then realizing, oh, wait, this is actually not going to get me the correct solution. Kind of just, again, I compare it to like playing sports. I'm a huge sports fan. Like, you don't just go into like a big match and just like kind of like, all right, I'll just wing it and figure it out. You want to know your opponent. You want to know what the tasks and the goals at hand and kind of work off of that to have success. All right, so we do have the pseudocode for us this time around. So I'm actually going to copy this and go off of that. Copy that, drop that into my file here. Unfortunately, this was commented for Python. So we haven't gotten to Python comments, but those are hashtags. Let me quickly change all these. All right, so we have, I guess, approximately seven steps listed here. So it's very detailed. Your pseudocoding doesn't necessarily have to be this detailed, but let's actually go through what the pseudocoding game plan is asking for, and let's see if it makes sense. So first, we want to create a method to Roman, and that takes in an input of a number. So that's already been done for us. We have a function that takes in a number, create an output string and set it to empty. So this is, I guess, just trying to create what we expect this function to return. So I'm just going to return, let's say, Roman string. So I need to create that variable. So the first thing I'll do probably in this function is create a variable that I'm going to return. It's called Roman str, and that'll be an empty string. And then in the middle, I'm going to have my logic, and at the very end, I'm going to return it. So we're just kind of forming the base structure of this function without having any logic really implemented yet. All right, step 3. Create a Roman numeral to Arabic map that includes Roman numerals as keys and Arabic numbers as values. All right, so this is kind of talking about our structure of how we're going to contain our data. But before I kind of get to that point, I just want to know how I'm going to go about solving this problem. All right, so I'm actually going to step out of my pseudocode and kind of just think about this on a high level. So I'm going to create a very simple scenario. So anytime you're dealing with like a larger challenge or a larger algorithm, always good to just break it down into the simplest case or like a very simple case, just to start off with that and then expand it from there. That's kind of how I approach any coding challenge I'm dealt with. So here I'm going to just create a scenario where, let's say I have only 2 increments. All right, that's going to be 1s and 10s. All right. So any number I'm going to try to represent, I'm going to only be able to use 1s and 10s as my increments. All right, so what I mean by that, let's say I have a number of 43, and I want to break that down into my increments. I'm going to say, all right, I can only use 10s and 1s in this case. So I know that there's going to be 4 10s, so I'm going to do 10 plus 10 plus 10. All right, that'll give me the 40 component of it, and then I'll do 1 plus 1 plus 1. All right, so if I wanted to break it down into my 2 given increments, mentally, I know that 43 should map out something like this. Everyone with me there? All right, so let's actually try to figure out what algorithm I can use or create that will take in 43 as my number. So that's going to be the input to this function, and break it down into this sort of output in terms of my increments. All right, so for now, let's just say num is going to equal 43. So I'm going to ignore the input here and set it equal to 43. And now I want to say, okay, so mentally, I was able to do it pretty quickly, but let's actually think about it how programmatically we'd break this number down based on our increments, right? So first thing I would do is, again, mentally, I took the largest increment and then figured out how many times that went into my number here. So I'm going to do that here also. So knowing that 10 is my largest, let's say, how do I want to do this? Let's do increment 10 equals I'm going to create an object, and let's say 10 will be my key. Trying to think about this. Sure. And then my value will be plus 10. Or we'll do 10 plus. Okay, and then my increment of 1 will be similar, value of 1, and 1 plus. Okay, so I have my 2 increments here, and now I want to use these increments to get an output of something similar to this. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to use my largest increment, because I just that's kind of how we divide up numbers. We don't want to use the lower one because that's just going to be 41 singles. That's not usually what we want to represent using our increments. So let's do number. How do I determine how many times my increment goes into number? Anyone have an idea there?
You could use the mod.
You do like a modulo and floor, or no, not a modulo, but just divide and then use the floor function.
Yep. So I heard a couple, maybe a little different responses there. So we do have the mod operator, which is the % sign, and we also can divide. So we're going to have to use both, but we want to make sure we know which one in this case. When we want to know how many times our increment goes into it, we are going to want to divide. So let's quickly do that. I'm going to do a console. Let's do let results equal number. I'm going to divide by my increment. So again, my increment is a object with a key and a value. So I'm going to do num, let's do divide by inc 10. And then I want to get my key from that. So I guess I'll do, I don't want to do this. All right, I think I've gone the wrong path here. So I'm going to actually make this a list, just to make this a little easier for me. My code's not going to look the greatest, but hopefully we could manage these lists. So basically, these lists have two values. The first entry will be the increment value, and the second value will be the string representation. So in this case, I'm going to get the first value. So this is the actual numeric value of increment. Well, let's actually print that out. So I'm going to print results to, sorry, console.log that result. And let's kind of see what this outputs. So always get to incrementally test as you're writing. You don't want to write your entire algorithm and then, then test it, because there might be a lot of bugs in there, and some bugs might compound with other bugs and just makes it that much harder to debug. So I'm just going to run this incrementally and make sure I get what I expect. So to Roman. And I guess the input here doesn't matter, but I guess 43 is what I wanted, so I don't need to manually set it. Okay, so there, Roman string's not going to be used right now. I just want to know what this is going to print out. So I'm going to run that in my terminal. So I have Roman numerals. I'm in the correct folder, so I'm going to do node run my Roman numerals file. Okay, so I got 4.3. That is what I would expect when I divide number by a value of 10. So that's the 10 that's being extracted here. I get 4.3. So my goal here was to figure out how many times I can use this 10 increment. So 4.3 kind of tells me that, but I actually just want, the whole number. I don't care about the decimal. So I think Jack mentioned it, but anyone else have an idea of how I can only get the 4 out of here and ignore kind of the leftovers here?
Math.floor.
Yep, you got it. So if you guys aren't familiar with it, there's a built-in math library for JavaScript that has a bunch of functions. Floor will just basically round down to the nearest integer. So in this case, that makes sense because I want to just drop off the 0.3. I'm going to use math.floor and surround my division there. So if I give this a run, notice I just get the 4, which is what I was looking for. So it looks like we're making progress here. Great. All right, so result is going to be the number of increments that, I guess my 10 increment that goes into it. So I'm going to want to print that out at some point. So now that I have this Roman string, let's kind of add to that. So I'm going to do a plus equals, and I want to take this string value and add that, I guess, the number of times that my increments was going into that number. So I'm going to do inc 10, get the first index. So the first index is the second value, or index 1, I should say, not the first index. Index 1 is the second value here, because again, remember, lists are always 0 based, not 1 based. That's something they get used to in the programming world. But I want to do this, I guess, a certain number of times. So there's a couple of ways I could do this. One way would be a for loop. So let's just go with that. So for, let's do let I equals 0. I is going to be less than results. Again, if there's any questions along the way while I'm coding, please stop me, and we definitely want to make sure everyone's following along. All right, so this is going to be a for loop that's going to go through a result number of times. So if you guys remember, result in this case was 4, which is just telling me how many times my increment goes into my initial number. And each time that it does, I want to add the string representation to my string. Okay, so I'm going to do that for my 10 increment. Going off of this, my code for my 1 increment is going to be very similar. So I'm actually just going to copy this for now and then paste it below. So let's add some comments. Always have comments. So this will be 10s increments, and this will be the 1s increments. Okay. So the only thing I need to change here is make sure I'm using the right list. So in this case, I have inc1, which I declared above here. Let's actually move this down a little bit. Drop that there. And I'll drop this here. Okay, so we're basically just building up this string. Again, hopefully you guys are familiar with this plus equals notation. If you're not, please please kind of ask. But essentially what this is doing, this is the same thing. If I did it the long way, would be if I just did Roman string plus whatever I had here, so int 10. Okay, so these two lines are equivalent. This is just a faster way to write it. So again, when you're writing code, especially long, or like thousands of lines, like little gains like this just kind of adds up as you're typing all those lines. All right, so we're combining the string here. We're adding onto the string here. So let's actually look at our string incrementally. So I'm gonna do a console log for Roman string here. And I'll do the same thing after our ones place. All right, let's see what we get out of this. And if that's
Hey, Ankur,
Yep.
I'd recommend removing the let in front of your second result assignment for the ones.
thank you. That was definitely gonna be an error. I appreciate that.
I also have a question just when you get to a stopping point.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna give this a run and then definitely want to address your question. But Sean, thank you so much. That is another great example of pair programming. I'm glad that I have extra eyes to double check my code. All right, so let's give this a run and let's see what's output. So I'm gonna do node Roman numerals. Again, if you hit the up arrow in your terminal, it'll just give you back the last command you ran, so it's save some time. All right, so I got something here. It's not what I expect, so there's definitely a bug in my code. So the first time I printed out my value of Roman string, I did get that 10 plus 10 plus 10, which is what I expected. But it looks like I kind of screwed up my ones. And I think I know why. Can anyone maybe tell me why? Or does anyone notice what went wrong here?
Yeah, once you basically add the tens to your string, you need to decrement your number by the amount of basically the number of tens you removed.
Absolutely, you got it. So if you notice in my output here, I'm not gonna count these all, but I'm gonna expect these are probably 41 ones that got printed out here. So that's not what I wanted, or 43 ones, sorry, that got printed out
We're
here.
also dividing by 1.
Yep, yeah, so I'm dividing by 1. Sorry, say that again.
You're dividing by 1 there.
Yeah, so that is true. I'm dividing by 1 here. But I think the key part of the problem is that I never updated my num value. So num still equals 43 here. In that case, we already handled like the 40 portion of it with our tens increment. So we want to remove that 40 out of our original number. So that is a step that I definitely missed here. So let's kind of deal with that. So I'm going to do num equals num. Let's just say minus. So our increment is stored here, and then the result was the number of times it went into it. So this will be the tens value. Result will be 4 based on our calculation before. So this will basically subtract 40 from num. Now, I don't need parentheses here. If you guys kind of just remember your order of operations, multiplication happens before subtraction, but it never hurts to be more clear with your code. So I actually usually will put in parentheses, even if they're optional. So in this case, it makes it clear that, to anyone reading this code quickly, that this multiplication is being done before the subtraction. All right, so this is going to update my num value so that it chops off the 40, and then let's see what we get out of there. So I'm going to clear my terminal by typing clear, and then give this a run again. All right, there we go. So my output looks much more like what I expected. Notice I got 10 plus 10 plus 10, and then I got 3 ones. So that looks like what I expected from, again, this hypothetical case. Again, this isn't Roman numerals, but it's kind of along the lines of how Roman numerals are formed. So if I actually wanted to make this a bit closer to Roman numerals, I'm actually going to change my string to be X here. So that's the representation for Roman numerals. And then for ones, it's I. So let's make that quick change and let's see our output. Okay, I think this, this looks like Roman numerals. So I think we're on the right track. Definitely want to test it because again, we're only using 2 digits right now, or 2 Roman numerals right now, which is X and I. So we got to factor in a few other ones. And also test out some other numbers to make sure that, this is one particular case. It might break on like 25 might be a different issue. So definitely test a few more. But I think on a high level, I think we have a good general algorithm for, approaching Roman numerals here. So with that, I want to take a quick pause because I know there was a question out there. Kyle, I think you had the question.
Yeah, thanks, Encore. So I noticed like when we originally started out, we did the math.floor and it returned or divided by 10, and it or the I'm sorry, but anyways, the output was 4.3.
Mhm.
I'm wondering if there's like maybe like a theory or just like is there a way to pass that 0.3 instead of running math.floor to like a variable so that it kind of like where one you know what I mean, like past that remain that non-whole number aspect of that digit, like 0.3 to equal 1, so that we can just like kind of maybe cut out some of the process there. So
Okay, I might ask for a clarification there. So I think what you're saying is when we're doing, this without the floor, so we're just doing console log with this division only, we're getting 4.3.
right, so then we do math.floor, right, and we get 4.3. So I'm wondering if there's a way to pass a variable that picks up that 0.3 leftover
Gotcha.
and maybe just kind of cut out the rest of it to, kind of like consolidate it a bit. Would that be something that's possible?
Yeah, so there's no one operation that will both so if my original number was 43, I think there's no one operation that I know that will both grab me the 4 and remove the 4. So it's got to be done in 2 steps. The first step is what we're doing here, is where we're subtracting the number. We could do this another way, and probably the better way would be using the modulo operator. So instead of doing this operation, I would argue that if we just did a mod of the increment, so this would give me the same thing. So let me put both of those back up there. All right, I'm just gonna write this out. Hopefully you guys are following along. All right, so both of these separately will give you the same result. Again, we're updating num in both cases, so let's just do, new num here. All right, so both of these will achieve the same thing. Modulo operator is the quicker way to do it, so definitely get familiar with that. In this case, what this operator will do is divide num as many times as it can evenly by the increment, and then whatever's left over will be spit out as the output. That's what the modulo operator does. That's effectively what we were doing with this kind of manually, where we're taking our result, which is the number of times it went into our original number, and then subtracting that out. So the modulo operator, again, doesn't care how many times it goes into it, it just gives you the remainder, right? And so division tells you how many times the increment goes into it, and then modulo tells you what's left over. So I think, Kyle, maybe that's what you're asking, how to get the leftover bit?
Yeah, it totally makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Cool, yep. But yeah, I think the modulo operator is the better way to go here, so I'm actually just gonna substitute that in. But yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Definitely want to use the modulo operator. So inc10, I believe, was my variable. So that. All right, let's clean this back up. Okay, so all right, so we got a general something that looks like it might work. Let's maybe just test this out with a couple other items. Let's do something smaller. Let's do 20. Let's do 27. All right, it's gonna give this another run. I get an error because I have a random 43 here for no good reason. All right, notice, so the 2.7 is coming from my console log on line 22. So that is just division. Then I'm breaking it down into each piece. So the first piece is the tens increment, which there's two values that go into it. That's why I get double X here. And then I get a 7, which is the second part of my logic. And then I get 7 ones here. So if we go back to our challenge, let's kind of read on. I kind of failed to read it. We have lazy Roman numerals, and then we have modern Roman numerals. Let's make sure we understand the difference here. So in lazy Roman numerals, we can do VIII, so that basically 4 I's. In modern Roman numerals, that changes a bit. So in that case, it'll be IX instead of VIII. But for now, I'm just focused on part 1. So part 1 is lazy Roman numerals, and that's what I'm kind of seeing out here. So notice I have 7 ones here. But the thing I kind of left out was the V, and we also have L, C, D, and M. So let's actually incorporate all of those now that I have something going here. I'm going to add that to my comments because I don't have these memorized. All right, so we did that. We did a case where only I and X exist, but let's kind of incorporate these extra ones. So kind of want to ask you guys a question here. We have our algorithm kind of mapped out here. I know if I wanted to add a 5, I'll just kind of do a quick copy paste here. Let's get rid of this one. I'm gonna copy paste all this. And the only change that I make is for the 10. So I have a 10 here, ink 5, this is a V. Let's get rid of this comment there. Oops, screw that up. All right, so there, a couple more places. Okay, so I'm pretty sure, I haven't tested this, but actually let's just test it quickly instead of just relying on what I'm guessing here. Of course, so I did that let result again. Bad. Okay, I got XXVII. That looks like what I expect, just kind of mentally doing the Roman numerals in my head. So again, I was able to add my 5s increment pretty quickly. Can anyone tell me why my current design is not the best here?
Because you're repeating yourself.
Absolutely. So whenever you're designing your algorithms, always try to keep an eye out for repeated structures or repeated logic. You want to condense that down. This is something I would probably say the most throughout this cohort. Don't just accept a working solution. Once you get to a working solution, iterate on it and try to see how you can improve it. And there's so many ways you can improve it. Algorithmically, as in the runtime, this is something we'll get into probably in week 3. But computers generally are fast, but when you get into very, 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 very large numbers of iterations, you will see the impact. So if your algorithm is inefficient and you're running, let's say like 10 million loops of something, you will see your application take a while. So at that point, you're going to want to add some optimizations, for example. Other things like code clarity, like you want to make sure that your variables are named appropriately, that it's easy to read. So there's, again, so many ways to improve your solution, both just aesthetically in terms of comments, functions, dividing it up into separate files if you have a lot of code, but also algorithmically, like you don't want to have repeated code if you can avoid it. There's something called the DRY principle, which we'll probably reference a couple times at least. DRY stands for don't repeat yourself. So it's a general principle that all software developers try to follow in terms of if you see something being done even twice, try to condense it down just to reduce that redundancy. The reason also a benefit of that is, let's say I need to change my algorithm for what I'm doing here. Like, let's say I want to change, what do I want to change? Maybe I want to print something to my console that's a little different. So I want to say this result is, right? So since I have this in 3 places, I'm going to have to go down here and also change my console log here, and then also go down here. So just as a developer, it gets kind of more cumbersome to update. In this case, I only have 3 copies of this, right? But when I get to adding, the L, the C, the D, I'm going to have 7 different copies of generally the same thing, right? There are some differences, like the increment values are different for each pass, but the structure, the logic that we're doing is essentially the same. So that's what I want to condense down here. So thank you for whoever suggested in condensing this. Absolutely, that's something we want to do. So let's actually kind of look at the similarities that we have between all these. So we are doing basically a for loop each time. We're doing a division by some increment value. So let's try to figure out how we could smartly condense this down. So one thing, going back to our pseudocode, is to create a map. So when we say map, this means like an object or some way we could just map increment value to a numeric value, or sorry, an Arabic value, I guess, or Roman numeral value to a numeric value. So I'm going to create an object here. Let's say Roman, say decimal to Roman. And let's kind of add these values back in here. How do I want to do this? Let's do it the other way. Roman. I'll see how this goes. All right, Roman decimal to Roman. So we have.
Hey, Ankur.
Yep.
I have a question. For the keys in an object, can they be numbers? My reading yesterday when we were trying to do something similar said your keys for objects in JavaScript couldn't be numbers, but I guess they can because it's just an array, right?
That is a great question, and that's something I'm actually was kind of trying to think back to, because I know in Python, I think you definitely can have numeric keys. In JavaScript, I'm about to find out, so that's a good point. Let's kind of discover that together. So let me copy these in here. Sorry, this is a bit cumbersome. All right, so we have 1,000. Put that up top. Let's see. It's M. 500 is, what was it? D. And then we have 100 is C, and 50 is L. Alrighty, I think that should take care of all the conversions. Let me just sort this manually. Don't forget my commas there. Okay, so we have our structure here that's going to house all of our increments and the appropriate Roman numeral, or I guess Arabic. Sorry, what do they call it? Arabic, I guess, are what I'm calling decimal, and Roman numerals are what we're converting to. All right, there we go. I'm just going to format this a little better so it's a little easier to read for me. Tab these out. All right, there we go. So now that we have this, we should be able to use this in our calculation here. So I no longer need these increments, but I want to make sure that I'm using the right thing. So I'm trying to think about this. Let's see. So I'm going to use my key, I guess, as my increment value, but that might be converted to a string, I think, as we were suggesting. So let's test this out. Never hurts to test. So I need my increment. So I know I'm going to use a for loop. Basically, my goal is me going through all the key values here. So let's do that. So let's create a for loop. Let's do let's for decimal and decimal to Roman. Okay, let's see what this prints out. So I'm going to do console.log of decimal, and then console.log of the Roman value. So decimal is my key in this case. All right, and let me comment all this good stuff out. So I want to cloud my output.
Your key auto completed to the name of the object.
Thank you. See, pair programming, love it. All right, so I'm just gonna do this, give this a quick run, see what I get out of it. Okay, so I got 1 and then an I. So notice this is something to keep in mind. I ordered my object, but notice that ordering didn't stick, as in objects don't have insertion order, right? So in this case, I'm looping through decimal to Roman. Notice that it handled the one key first, even though 1 key is last in my object. So don't rely on any sort of ordering for objects. Something to keep in mind here, and it's highlighted here. So we're getting the correct output values for the key and the Roman numeral, but the ordering is being something I want to fix here. So one thing to keep in mind, arrays are ordered. So if I wanted to create an array, that would give me some ordering. So let's actually switch this to an array. Again, the reason I want to do this is because I always want to use my largest increment first, and that's kind of why I ordered it this way. So now I have an array, but these need to be objects still. So we'll do it this way. Do what I wanted to. Sorry, I'm not as good as Tom with VS Code tricks, but there is a way to kind of highlight all these lines and add them at the same time. It's called there's like a multi-cursor function, but we'll just do it the long way. Okay, so now I have my objects here. So basically, I have an array with objects nested in it.
An extra comma at the end.
Right here. Yep. So I think in that case, the comma won't hurt, but if I wanted to add a new value, we just make it slightly easier, but yeah, we can get rid of that comma. All right, so we have an array now. So this is going to preserve ordering. So the first item I'm going to get to is this object in the first slot here, but I got to change this. So decimal to Roman is an array. Let's say it's going to be an object, and then that object will have, I guess, a key and a value in it. So let's do for So this is going to be a kind of a silly for loop because there's only one object in here. So there's another way to extract our object values. Let's just do this quickly. In objects. Any questions? I want to make sure I'm not losing anyone with what I'm going to do here. So basically,
do a for of loop for the array and then a for in loop for the object.
Yes, thank you. That is a great call. That is a thing that got me early on. Of needs to be used for arrays. That's a great point there. If you use in, I believe your object values are going to be your index values. So you're going to get 0, 1, 2. I actually want the actual items here. So thank you so much for that. I was definitely going to mess that up. That was not a purposeful mistake that I made. But of, just be aware of that keyword. When you're looping over arrays in this format, you want to use of for arrays instead of in. Let's see. All right, so we get an object. Let's see what this looks like. I'm going to clear my terminal, run this again. All right, I got undefined. That's not good. But notice my ordering is good now. So I got 1,000, 500, and 100. That is the ordering I wanted, but I squeaked something up here because this should be objects. Save that. Okay, so I gave that a run again. So I have 1,000 and M. So this looks like what I want. In terms of my ordering, I want to go from my largest increments down to my smallest ones. So I have a for loop here, but this for loop is basically going over like one object. There's a different way to get that key. I'm actually going to Google this. So let's do JavaScript get key.
I believe it would be just object.keys and then passing the object.
Yep. So always good to read documentation if you're unsure. But in this case, I think this is what the suggestion was. There's object.keys we can use. So the example here is we have an object, object1. We call object.keys to get all the keys out of it. We're going to want the first value out of that. So yeah, so let's change this for loop just to give that example. So we can do objects.keys. Again, I'm just following what I found on the MSC or Mozilla documentation. So object.keys and then my object. And then I know that I only have one key in there. So I'm going to do 0 to access the first key. So that's going to be my decimal value. So let's give some variables here. Let decimal equal the key. Again, this 0 is saying the first object here, give me that key. So this object only has one key in it, which is at the 0th index. That's what keys returns. And I want the first one out of there. So decimal is that, and then I still have my object here, so I think this should be the same. So we got rid of a for loop, just to make it a little more clear what's going on here. Let's give this a run, make sure we didn't screw anything up. Okay, same output. I think we're good here. Let's go back to our logic now. So I got my ordering correct. I got all my increments and Roman numerals equivalents set up. I'm going in the correct order. So I think that's good progress. Let's take our logic that we had for, I guess, increment 5 and drop that into here. So I'm just going to comment these out in case I want to inspect the values later. Okay, so let's uncomment that. So the shortcut for that is command / will uncomment and comment interchangeably. It's a good way to quickly do that. All right, so I have increment 5 here. I know I don't need that. So in this case, 5 is my decimal value. So keep that in mind. And my object at decimal value is going to be my Roman numeral. So that's what I want there. Just to make this easier to understand, again, this is totally optional. I'm just going to create a Roman value and set that equal to object at decimal. Okay, so I have decimal and Roman. Let's just make updates here. So num is our original passing value. Increment at 0 was our decimal. I'm going to call this increment. Sorry for all the name changes. Let's call that increment. And okay, results. This
Encore, I was gonna suggest something. If you press Command F, you can do a find and replace of each variable name if you want to. You could type in the variable name into find, and then it'll find each instance of it. If you that way, you don't have to go through all the code.
Absolutely. Yep. Great. Again, there are definitely faster ways to do some of the things I'm doing. I sometimes get uneasy with find and replace just in case I have like a variable named Roman and then something else. You could do a whole word search, I believe, also. There are options that will give you the proper replacement. Good suggestion there. I appreciate that. Yeah, hopefully I don't have too many to replace, so I'm just going to do it manually just in this example. All right, so this is our increment. All right, so I basically took what I had before, put it into a for loop. So now that I can get rid of all this redundancy, I'm just going to delete all this commented code and save me some space and some redundant logic. And let's get rid of that. All right, so just chopping off what we had before. All right, so let's kind of just scan what we've done here. We have our for loop getting our increments and Roman numerals from our object that we created. So I should probably make this const. Right, it's decimals Roman. We have increment Roman. So basically we create our results, and we need to create a result. We take our original number, divide by our increment, and we print out that result. Then we have a for loop nested in here, which is gonna, populate our string that number of times. There are other ways to do this. I know there's a string method that can, I think it's called string.repeat, which will repeat a character X amount of times. So instead of doing a for loop, that might clean up my code, but for loop here is definitely not incorrect. So I have that for loop, which is gonna be populating my string with the Roman equivalent of this increment. And then I'm printing that out just to get another, spot, just check there. And then num is being updated by basically taking the remainder by dividing or modulating with the increment here. Sorry, I butchered that. So we're using the module operators. Basically, we're updating num by removing how many times that increment was going into num. So num should be like if we had 43, the first time around, if we're using the times increment, we'll take out the 40 portion of it. All right, and then we'll just do this thing again until we go through all of our increments here. But one shortcut I just thought of is if num gets down to 0, as in let's say we had 40, or let's say we had 400, right? And we use our hundreds increment. When we have our hundreds increment and then do a modulo, num is going to be 0 at that point. When we get to 0, we know that we don't need to check the rest of them. So again, let's say I had 400 as my input. When we get to the hundreds increment, they'll evenly go into num. At that point, I can kind of just know we don't need to check L, X, V, or I. So that's just a special case I'm going to add in here. And this is just to make my algorithm that much more efficient. I'm going to add an if num equals 0. I'm going to do a break. Is everyone familiar with the break keyword? I'm not sure if we went over that or if you guys have seen it. Just to reiterate it in case anyone's unfamiliar with it, the break keyword will basically exit whatever loop you're currently in and just go to outside that loop. So this break is going to say, stop doing all these iterations and just abandon and basically go outside of this curly brace. Let me get more space here.
Would that be the same syntax in Python as well?
Yep. Break keyword exists in Python, many other languages. There's break. There's also continue, which we'll talk about. Continue, you'll see it. We're going to go over this today, so don't worry. We'll talk about this. So I don't want to confuse you guys right now with this challenge. Okay, so in this case, if my num has gone down to 0, I know I have no further conversions to do. So I'm just going to break, which means abandon this for loop and just continue on down here if there's additional logic to do. So in this case, I don't think there's additional logic I want to do. Maybe I'll print out, console.log my final value before I return it from this function. Okay. Let's give this a run. I'm not sure, there might be bugs here. Who knows? Good to test it. Save. Bring up my terminal. If you guys remember, the shortcut for the terminal in VS Code is Control tilde, which which is kind of an awkward shortcut, but I'm in Roman numerals. Make sure you're in the right folder. I've seen this before where students kind of run it. So I'm going to do node Roman numerals. If I do it here, I'm going to get this error saying cannot find module. Now this again looks like a scary error. Like you're like, wait, what's going on here? All this is saying is you're not in the correct folder because Roman numerals is nested within a JS folder. So if I wanted to, I could repeat this command and just do it as JS/, and that'll totally work. And that totally didn't work because I have a bug. I have object decimal. Oh, because I changed my value. So I think this is where the suggestion of just doing a find and replace all would have been better. I think that was someone's suggestion, but yep. All right. Hopefully that takes care of it. All right, there we go. So we got some intermediate outputs. So these zeros, can anyone tell where these zeros are coming from if you guys remember from my code? So I'm printing out some results here.
So it'd be no thousands, no 500s, no 100s.
Yep, absolutely. You got it, Sarah. So we have a small number in this case. My test number is 27. So basically, for the larger increments, 1,000 goes into that 0 times 0, 0. So the first 4 increments that I'm using are going to be zeros. That's why I have 4 zeros here. But when I get down to my tens, notice I get a 2, and I start getting some output in my string that I'm building up. Yep, absolutely. Good diagnosing there. All right, let's try a larger number. So I don't know, let's try less 683. Kind of eyeballing that, I would expect that to be, a bunch of C's, so 6 C's, and then an L, some X's, and all right, there's gonna be a whole bunch in there. So this is a good point where I'm gonna go to my spec file now. I think I have something that generally works. Let's actually add some test cases and then verify. So we have our base ones here. Let's add a few more. So let's see, let's just add some random numbers. Mark Stanley, you're first on my screen. What's your favorite number between 1 and 1,000? Or I guess higher than 1,000 too, that works.
300.
300, great test case. All right, who else do we have on my screen? Don Kelly, could you give me a random number between, let's say 1 and, how high do my numerals go again? Between 1 and like 10,000?
1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3, excellent choice. Reno, could I get let's go for a larger number, maybe above 1,000 here.
Let's go for 2,400.
2,400. All right, cool. All right, so we have some test cases here. I'm going to add maybe one more, just to get some crazy numbers in here. Let's try, I don't know, 940. Let's go 939. All right, so let's just quickly mentally figure out what these will be. 300s, I think, simple enough. I think that's CCC. 123, I believe, should be CXX. Again, this is lazy Roman numerals, so we're going to adapt these for the modern case. 2,400, I forget already. That's M, CCC, C, and then 939. That's a little more involved. I think that's C.
You need another M in the previous one.
For 2,400, yep.
Good catch. All right, so a bunch of C's here, 9 of them.
A D instead of 5 C's.
Oh, right, yeah, thank you. Yes, I totally forgot about my 500 increment. Thank you so much. That definitely saves me some C's here. So that's going to be a C, then some C's, 3 X's, I believe, and then I have 5 increments. All right, so this one's a little more lengthy, but it's a good test case, testing a lot of the increments there. Okay, so assuming that our expected outputs are correct, again, definitely want to double check these. Thank you guys for being those extra eyes for me. Assuming these are correct, let's see if we pass our test cases. If we don't, we want to go back and refine it. I'm just going to quickly go in here, just comment out some of my console logs. I'll keep my last one in there, but I don't want to have too much cluttering my output. I'm going to save that. All right, let's run our text spec file and cross our fingers. Let's see, hopefully we pass all of our 7 test cases that we have. I'm actually going to go into my node or JS folder and then do node Roman numerals spec. Okay, looks like we failed one. Okay, I see why, but all right, so looking at our output here, let me make this a little larger. Okay, so where's this coming from? Oh, sorry. So I had test case down here that I don't want to run. Okay, so we ran 7 test cases. We did fail one of them. We'll get back to that one. But for the most part, it looks like we're passing all of our test cases. That's definitely good to see. The reason we failed this one is because this is for the modern Roman numeral. We're doing lazy Roman numerals right now. So this should actually be III for the lazy case. So I think that's my mistake for not checking my test cases for what I was testing. All right, so running that, we're getting all truths. At this point, I'm pretty comfortable with the solution. And there might be some edge cases that I'm not meeting. So I might want to add some specific test cases to make sure I'm testing each increment. Like we tested M's once. I guess we're testing a D here. But I think we covered our bases with most of our test cases here. So going off of this, I feel pretty comfortable. Might want to test a little bit more. But for now, I'm going to be satisfied with this. Looking at my code here, let me get back our space here. I might want to go through this, make sure I could, condense this. One thing I would definitely suggest is pulling this outside of my function. So, because that's a constant value, it's not going to change each function call. So let's put that there. What else? I could probably get rid of these comments, but it doesn't hurt if I want to test it later on. So let's say I'm satisfied with this. I'm going to commit this as an incremental commit. So this is part 1. Let's see if I can pull the audience. Jeremiah, I've made all the modifications I want to. I want to now add this to my Git project and eventually push it up to GitHub. What's the first thing I want to do Git-wise here?
You do git add and then a period.
Yep. And just to reiterate, so git add period will add all your modifications. Hypothetically, let's say I had made some changes in my Python files, but I didn't want to commit it. In that case, I would not want to use the period because that would add all changes from this entire Git project. But since I know I didn't make any modifications there, I'm just going to do git add period. All right, so that added some stuff to my Git project. Sean Kernan, what's the next thing I'd likely want to do here?
Sorry, trying to unmute. You got to do, what's the command? Git commit flag M and then some message like Anker's phase 1 solution.
Yep, absolutely. So we were doing part 1, so lazy Roman numerals. I'm just going to copy that, save some time. Solved part 1 lazy. Okay, so that's my commit message. I'm going to do a git push. So I don't have to do a git push here. I can make more changes now, and then, like, let's say I complete part 2, I could do a git add, git commit for part 2. So it's actually, yeah, I don't need to do a git push right now. So I'm good here. I've saved my changes. These are, if I mess this up somehow, I could always revert back to this commit because that's stored on my local machine. Okay, so let's get to part 2. But before we get to that, let's take a break because I think we've been going probably for a while now. So let's take a quick break. I have 10:52 on my end. Let's take an 8-minute break, and then we'll solve the modern Roman numerals part, and then dive into our lecture today.
I was wondering, you can add and commit as long as you're inside the folder structure for that project. You don't have to be in the root folder for the project.
Correct. Yep. Yeah, you can kind of do a git add and git commit from any level within your Git project. Good question, though. All right. Yeah, see you guys in 8 minutes. Let's take a short break. Thank you, Zoom. All right, so we've completed the lazy Roman numerals. So that's part 1 of our challenge. Okay. Next, we want to do the modern Roman numerals here. So here, the only, I guess, main difference here is that we have, IV for 4 instead of III, which is for our lazy. So we got to be cognizant about that. So there's, I guess, there's probably more than 2 ways to go about this, but there's definitely at least 2 ways I can think about it. So there's a hard way and an easy way, the way I kind of conceptualize it. So if you actually know how Roman numerals work, I believe the rule is you can never have 4 consecutive digits in a row. So kind of going off of that, you can have I for 1, you could have, that's 1, this is 2, this is 3. Once you get to having 4 consecutive of same digits for the modern Roman numerals, this isn't allowed. So that's where we switch off to, in this case, it'll be IV for 4, right? And then V is 5, and then 6 continues on from there, right? So again, the official rule, as I understand it, is that you can't have 4 consecutive numerals, the same numerals 4 times in a row. So that's where you get into like kind of inverting the next highest increment with the increment you want to subtract with. Again, there's some odd rule there. We could try to code that up, but that's the hard way to do it. So if you want like a really hard challenge, you guys can go for it. But my goal here is to solve this challenge, not to do it in the hardest way possible. So kind of think about it that way. I want to know how many buckets I have. So I guess the key here is I can try to formulate like the 4 bucket, which is IV in the hard way, or I could just kind of add that to my object here. So I'm actually going to create a new object, or sorry, new array. Let's call this Roman modern. This is going to have the same values that I had before, but now I'm going to add a few more increments that will kind of make my life easier. So I know that 4 is a special case. That increment is IV, or the Roman equivalent for that increment is IV. There's a few more. So I know there's a 9. I think every lower, so there's an IX for 9. All right, you guys kind of see what's going on here. So basically, I'm just figuring out how many buckets or increments are unique and using those. So IX, what else do we have? I think 40 is a unique case, or I guess a unique Roman numeral. So 40 to L. Again, I'm trying to make sure I remember these correctly. So we have XL, same thing with 90. All right, so we just have a few more increments, but otherwise our algorithm is going to be exactly the same. That's going to be CD. Wait, that's wrong. XC. What else do we have left? 90, 100, 400.
400 and 900.
Thank you. Yep. That's CD. So again, you take the larger increment, subtract the lower one, and kind of invert them there. All right, and then we have 900. So these are all the new increments that we to deal with. So this is going to be 1,000 minus 100. So that's basically 100 there, 1,000 there. All right. So we have all these increments, but now that we have this, we should be able to just simply substitute our decimal to Roman modern instead of our decimal to Roman. And hopefully that should work the same. If not, we obviously need to make modifications there. Let's give that a try. So I'm just going to add in modern here. And everything else is going to basically stay the same. Probably could clean this up a little bit. Not the most condensed code, but it gets the job done for now. So I don't want to spend too much time kind of cleaning that up. Like I said, this for loop can be substituted with like a string repeat method. I probably don't need this incremental values necessarily, but it just makes my code a little more clear. All right, cool. So I made this to modern. Let's update our spec or our test cases. So I'm going to keep my original ones and then add new ones. So this can be commented for now. All right, let's go back to our modern setup. So I know 4 was IV. I think that was the only one that failed during a lazy one. So let's actually add a couple others. So let's do like a, a 940. Sorry, I lied about that. Some of these will be affected. So 939. I actually don't know what that is. I'm not going to try to calculate it. This is where Google will be my friend. So I'm going to be like 939 in Roman numerals. And Google's smart enough. There we go. So I'm going to trust Google is not lying to me. So I get that output here. So that is what I expect here. I think 2400 should, no, that might be different. I think for the 400 case, let's just have Google do all the work for me. MMCD, all right. 123, that probably is going to be the same, but let's just have Google see X high. Yeah, that one stays the same. 300, I believe that's going to be the same. So 4 change. All right, we have a few changes here. Let's just give this a quick spin and see what we come up with. We probably want to test each increment. So like in this case, I'm testing the 900, testing the 400. I'm not testing, I guess, a 4 anywhere. I am testing a 4 up here. So there's probably a few of these I didn't hit. I don't think I hit 90. Let's just add one test case for 90 here. Let's do a console log for, I don't know, let's go with 594. All right, so that'll be our last new test case, hopefully. All right, DXCIV. All right, each unique digits. Cool. Okay, so those are my test cases. Let's give our spec file a run now. I'm gonna do a CD into that folder, clear this out. It's gonna gain a little more terminal space here. I'm gonna do node Roman numerals spec.js. Okay, I got a bunch of output. Looks like I got a bunch of truths, so I'm feeling good about life right now. Again, could add more test cases, just make this a little more thorough, but I think what we have right now pretty much makes me feel pretty good about my modern updates. So I got passed all my test cases, all the values look correct. So with that, I think I completed part 2. So part 2 wasn't as, I guess, involved as part 1, since part 1 takes care of most of that logic for us. I think, okay. But one thing I want to kind of do here, I have this function toRoman that right now it's only doing modern. But what if I want to go back to, like, it's the lazy approach? Well, in that case, I would need to change this data structure back. But that kind of is not, I guess, user-friendly. Like, developer-wise, I'm a developer. I could change that willingly. But if someone was using my module here, they won't have that control. So one thing I can think of is, what if I had another function? So yeah, let's create a new function, call it exports to Roman modern function num. All right, so I create a new function called to Roman modern. I'm just going to copy everything I had here. Shift, forgot that L. Okay, so I copied all that, and the only difference here is I'm going to use that modern object here. Can someone tell me why this is not necessarily the best code I have written so far?
Are you not able to test it now using the was it the spec now?
Yeah, that is definitely one thing I have to update. So good catch there. I need to add a toModern for all of these. So let's just do that now, since before I forget. Good catch there. Well, let's think about redundancy-wise, right? I basically copied my entire function from what I had before, copied here, and made one change. Sometimes it might not be possible to reduce that further, but in this case, it definitely can be. The only difference between this function and the second function is which object I'm using. So what if I created a third function here? So I'm going to go down to the very bottom. Let's create a new function. Let's call it convert to Roman. This is actually going to take in 2 parameters. It's going to take in num, and let's just say a conversion, spell correctly, conversion data. I don't know what to call this. Conversion, yeah, let's call it conversion data. All right, I have a third function here. Notice I am not exporting this function. So I'm not going to expose this function to any module out there. I'm going to only use it internally in this file. I'm going to copy the contents over here. Drop that down here. All right. So instead of using decimal in the Roman, I'm going to use conversion data. And that's something I'm going to have to specify when I call this function. Conversion data goes there. I can delete all this good stuff. All right, now I have my main function is convert to Roman, and I have these, I guess, helper functions which are going to be exported, which will pass the correct data value that are housed in my local file. So here, I'm just going to do a return. I'm going to call my function, which is convert to Roman, pass it to num. In this case, for modern, I want to pass it, obviously, the modern data. And then likewise for my lazy case, I just want to pass the non-modern. So do that, swap these, just keep some ordering around. All right, there we go. So 2 simple functions here that call a shared function. Again, the reason I created this shared function is because the logic is basically identical. The only difference is the conversion data that we're using. So the callers of that function specifies what data we want to use, whether it be the lazy, which just has, I guess, the simpler increments, and then modern has slightly more advanced increments. Okay, so given that, I have 2 functions now. I made the change here, so I could actually run both my test cases. or both sets of test cases, I guess. So this is a lazy, say lazy test cases, and these are my modern ones. Okay, let's do one more thing. I want to get rid of this print or console statement just because it's cutting my output. All right, so let's give this spec file a run. Fingers crossed that we get, how many is it? We get 15 trues to the console here, so I need some extra space. Run this. All right. I'm not going to count all these, but probably 15 because I have 15 lines up here. But I got a bunch of trues. Makes me feel good about myself for the short time that I'm passing all my test cases that I created. Again, when you're creating test cases, make sure you test like all the aspects. You don't want to just have, you know, I guess in this case, just test all the I's and assume that's going to work correctly, right? You want to make sure you're testing all the different increments you're using. So hopefully I covered all the increments here. I did not double check, make sure I'm hitting all those increments, but when you're writing test cases, make sure you're testing all facets of what your input can be. All right, cool. I think I'm good to go here. So I'm going to do another git add, git commit -m. This is my second part. So solved. I'm just going to do a quick copy paste here. Part 2. Okay, got that copy. Yep. And commit. All right, so I made 2 commits, but I haven't pushed. So I'm going to do a git push origin. So this actually, actually, I want someone to tell me what this is going to do. So what do I have here? Vincent, can you tell me what git push origin actually does?
Yeah, so that's gonna, I guess it's gonna push it to wherever you not forked it from, but cloned it from originally. So back up to your GitHub account.
Absolutely.
So if I go back up to my VZ Brunstead GitHub account, that's where I can then create the pull request for that.
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah, so when we do a git add and git commit, this is doing stuff locally to our Git project. So git add basically adds all your modifications. Commit just has a save point. So again, if you're like working on a Word document, when you hit Control S, that's effectively what git commit is doing. It's saving that snapshot when you want to, where you want to save it. Git push origin is actually what will transfer your local changes up to your GitHub. So the reason you want to do that is so that you have it accessible and saved on in the cloud. So for whatever reason, if your computer crashes and you lose all your local files, GitHub will still have all your projects that you've been working on. So I'm going to do a git push origin. That'll take a couple seconds. Cool, I got done. All right, so I pushed it. I'm going to go back to my GitHub, which is over here. I'm going to do a refresh. So notice these timestamps, say 4 years ago, 3 years ago, 3 months ago. Let's do that refresh there. All right, notice that my JavaScript folder updated to say 2 minutes ago, because that's roughly when I did that push origin. It didn't seem like 2 minutes ago, but maybe I was talking for 2 minutes. But yeah, my Python folder was not updated because I did not make any changes to the Python file, and the README file was updated by someone else 3 months ago. If you want to see the history, I could go to the commits and kind of verify that. So it looks like John Young was making some changes. I might have made a change, but here's my actual commits here. So part 1 and part 2 are separated out. So if I want to see the changes between them, I could. But again, those are the 2 separate commits I made. They're housed in that Git, so I could kind of see what each of them did as I was adding them. Any questions on the Git portion?
Yeah, I have a question. Let's say you were doing the git commit part, but you didn't do the push thingy, and let's say unexpectedly your computer restarted itself because you didn't do the git push origin. Would that local commit file be like lost?
No, the git commit will still be saved. So all the git magic is done. Where is it? I do ls-a. This .git folder is housing all that information. So yeah, if your computer crashed but you're able to reboot again, you're going to have everything you had before in your Git project. The only thing is if you manually or somehow accidentally delete your .git folder, that's when you lose all your history.
Okay.
Yeah, just make sure you don't delete this unless you want to. Like sometimes I do that when I want to disassociate my project from Git and create a new Git repository or get a new Git project. You might want to delete it, but for most cases, don't modify this file or mess with it at all. It's doing a lot for you, and you don't want to screw it up. But good question there.
Encore, I have a question as well.
Yep.
So for some reason, if you had to revert to your previous commit, would the syntax for that be git reset? Looks like I looked it up. It says -- hard, and then there's something about git stash, git reset, and git stash pop to kind of revert to those previous commits.
Yep. Yeah, so let's actually try a couple of those quickly. I'm glad you asked. Git's really complicated. I'm not an expert at all. I kind of learn it as I need to. Like if I get into a situation and I don't know it, I'll look it up. So definitely the way to approach it. But yeah, let's kind of test that out quickly. So let's say I make a change. Again, I've pushed this, so everything right now is what's on my GitHub. Let's say I like add a change. Yeah, let's do it quickly. Let's say some bad code got added here. And all right, let's say this is some bad line of code. And then for whatever reason, I don't know how to fix my algorithm because I made a lot of changes. Just kind of imagine the scenario with me, if you will. Let's just add, some bad lines of code everywhere. All right, so now I'm in a state where like, okay, I've made too many changes. I don't know how to just undo it. So I'm not really comfortable with that. So I'm gonna, this is saved. So notice there's no white dot up here. So my files are saved, but I'm like, well, I wanna go back to what I had on GitHub. So if I wanna do on GitHub, that one I think is a little simpler. You wanna just do a git. Let me have my file open. So I have these bad lines of code here. I'll do a git reset -- hard. Sometimes you will need to specify from where, but I believe if you, I'm going to try git reset hard. Let's see if that works. Yep. So notice that all those bad lines of code went away. So basically, what git reset hard will do is update your local Git project to be exactly what the snapshot of the latest snapshot that was on your GitHub. Another question I think that came up was, what if I make a commit? So let's do a quick commit here. Commit number 1. All right, so I'm going to commit that change. I'm going to do a git add, git commit -m commit 1. All right, so I made that commit. Let's say I make another change. So bad change here. Notice I did not push this up to my GitHub. So I can't do a git reset hard because my GitHub is going to wipe out this commit 1 that I added, but I haven't pushed up. So if I want to get back to my commit 1 stage, but get rid of this bad change, that one's a little more involved. Let's see if I could figure this out. So I think you want to do a git log. All right, so when you do git log, it shows you all of your commits here. Each of these commits have this very long and ugly string. These are unique identifiers. So if I copy that commit number, and I want to revert to it, so let's see. Yeah, so commit 1 is what I want to get back to. So I'm going to do that reset back to that. So wait out of this, please. Right. So I'm going to do a git revert, I believe is the command. And I want the identifier. Let me double check this because I am not sure. So think git revert to commit. All right, there we go. So again, this is a good, if you guys kind of just search for git revert to commit, I think the first document here I've read before. It does a pretty good job of explaining it. But in this case, I did a git log. I got the identifier, and then I want to do a reset to that identifier. So I think not revert, but resets. There is a revert command. I'm not going to try to speak on it because I'm not too sure about it, but it does other items for you. All right, so git reset and then that unique identifier. If you look at the article here, they only use like the last 6 or 7 digits. Most of those will be unique enough, so Git should be able to figure out what commit you're talking about. In this case, I'm using the full ID of it. All right, so unstate changes after reset. So I'm back here. So we'll tell you it didn't get rid of that. So that did not do what I wanted to do. All right, so I think that took out the commit from my addition. So let's just do a git push origin. See what that happened. So sorry, I might be kind of butchering this because git always confuses me. Go here. All right, so commit 1 got committed. That is not what I wanted to do. So we want to get rid of this bad change, right? How do we go about that? Okay, so we might want to actually do a revert because we want to go back. So log. All right, I'm going to try this. If it doesn't work, I will kind of abandon this. All right, so we did a reset. I think I want to do revert to that. If it failed, please make your changes or stash them.
I think because you committed it, so now it.
Gotcha. Okay, I've gotten myself into a mess before digging deeper into this hole that I got into. There is a way to do it, so I'll say that much. I am kind of rusty on how to get rid of this based on a commit that I didn't push up. So apologies there, but don't want to take too much time on there right now. But great questions. Thanks for asking all those. Yeah, so we solved Roman numerals, we pushed it up. The last thing we need to do, don't forget to do your pull request. This is so that we can actually see that you guys are attempting these challenges. So you can go to my pull request tab. Here I'm going to do a new pull request. I'm going to review my changes, make sure this makes sense of this is actually what I committed. Sometimes you might have like the wrong thing or it might be on the wrong branch. Well, that looks good. So I'm just going to say Encore solution to Roman numerals. Again, doesn't have to be too complicated. Just add your name, maybe the title of the challenge. That's about it. I'm going to do a create pull request. It'll do its thing, take a couple seconds, and we're good. All right, cool. All right, so that takes care of Roman numerals. We do have a lecture to get into. I don't want to push too much into lunch, but let's try to get through our lecture. So let's take a quick break. Let's take a 3-minute break, let's say, just grab a cup of water, stretch your legs, and then we'll get into our lecture around 11:26, 11:27.